I always wanted to be a respectable person. I wanted to do something honorable, be able to help others, make my family and my country proud. And that's why my dream since I was only a little child was to become a soldier. I worked so hard my whole life to reach that goal, and eventually, I became one. Being a soldier is not an easy job. Sometimes, even your personal life is not a priority because your job is the most important thing. Regardless of all the cons and all the difficulties, I enjoyed my career. Unfortunately, it all took another path, one that I'm not proud of. I have a hard story to tell. A story that, apart from being dark, is also insane, but I need to talk about it. I need to tell you the story of Elena. The story took place in the early 90s when I was at the peak of my career. I'd been a soldier for 4 years when one of my supervisors approached me and told me that there was a position to work directly with a secret government agency. He told me that he thought about me when he heard that they were looking for someone. He said the job was top secret, but he knew I was one of the most honorable people he had ever worked with, so I had been highly recommended. When I heard about that position, I felt unsure. I was flattered that my superior would even consider me for such an important role, but I doubted myself. Although he insisted, telling me that it would be a good opportunity for me, and of course for my family, since I would be making more money and eventually. I was convinced. I just really wanted to do what was best for my family, and wanted to enjoy the prestige of working for a secret agency. The next day, when I went to work, someone was waiting for me at my superior's office. It was a man in a very nice suit. Judging by his appearance, I immediately noticed he must have been one of the people from the agency. My superior introduced me to the man who I'm going to call Alexander. He stood up from the chair he was sitting at, adjusted his suit, and shook my hand. "I've heard excellent things about you." He then made a gesture and my superior immediately left the room, and we were all alone. He explained he needed someone for a new position. He said he needed someone with a brilliant curriculum, someone who had been in combat, someone who basically has seen it all and is still strong, someone ambitious and, most important, patriotic. He said that's why he was looking specifically for a soldier. Hearing all of this, I was even more flattered than the previous day. I said yes to everything. I signed my contract and some confidential documents, and then was told I would start working the very next day. I was impressed by how quickly things were, but assumed that's what working for them was like, since they were the kind of guys who could make anything happen. The next day, I was picked up at my house by a man in a black SUV. This person gave me a uniform and told me to quickly go and change myself before getting in the car with him. I did it, and then we were ready to leave. The man drove me to a place far away from the city. It was a hidden location. From the outside, it looked like an old warehouse, but the inside was completely different, quite sophisticated, and of course, secure. There, the same man walked me to an office where I met the person who I spoke to the day before, Alexander. When I got to Alexander's office, he was with another man. Alexander introduced the man as Matt and told us we were going on a mission together. I was excited and couldn't stop smiling, but when I turned around to look at Matt, he seemed very serious. Matt was an expert, so maybe he was just too used to his job, and that's why he didn't seem too energetic. I didn't get many instructions from Alexander aside from him telling me I needed to listen and do whatever Matt said, which was not weird at all. When you're working on a secret mission, occasionally you don't get told where you're going or what you're going to do until you get there in order to keep it confidential. Remember, we're counting on you. Don't disappoint me, son, Alexander told me before I left his office. Matt remained there for 3 more minutes talking privately to Alexander. In the meantime, I kept wondering what the mission would be. My country had been in a conflict with its neighboring country for a while, so I was no stranger to war and combat. However, things were settling, so I had no idea what I would be doing. After Matt got out of Alexander's office, we headed to the parking lot, got into a car, and then it began. As I mentioned before, I knew nothing. The only thing I got told the day before was that this mission could last a week, and that because I was new, I would get paid before the mission was completed. I was amazed by that. This job paid way more than any other job I had before, so I thought I was living the dream. The ride was rather silent. Matt wasn't the most talkative person. I tried to talk to him from time to time, but all I got were short answers. I even tried to break the silence by talking to him about work, but it was uncomfortable. After a couple of hours, I started to notice we were heading to one of the borders, so I started to get nervous thinking we would have to go into battle. I think Matt could notice I was impatient, so he started explaining things to me. We're heading to the border. We're not going to leave the country. We're going to remain on our side, but we're going to pay someone a visit, he exclaimed. Is it the enemy? I asked him. Look, sometimes people seem innocent, but they're still the enemy, right? The person we're going to visit falls into that category. Just don't let your feelings get in the way, and do what I say. Okay? He told me. Understood, I said. What are we doing? We're going to a house to visit this woman. She's called Elena. She's the wife of one of our enemies. Her husband already passed away. He died in combat. We have been told that Elena is trying to brainwash people at the border, telling them that they belong in her country and trying to turn them against our government. Elena, along with some other people, are trying to form a rebellion. We need to stop that, Matt told me. What are we going to do to stop that, sir? I asked. We're going to take Elena to this particular place. But whatever happens, you must not be afraid, Matt said while I simply nodded. I followed his instructions carefully. We got to Elena's house at 1 a.m, captured her, and took her to one of our closest headquarters. It only took about 40 minutes. Once in the headquarters, Matt and I put Elena in this room that, I must admit, I was very surprised to see. The room was very big. It was very empty except for a few things. 2 of them included a TV and a DVD player. The other thing was a chair with restraints all over, where we sat Elena and then we tied her up. Matt then told me he would be back in a couple of minutes. In the meantime, I had to stay with Elena, as she kept asking who we were and why we were doing this. I initially felt bad for her, but then I remembered that she was the enemy, and I eventually told her to shut up. Matt came back quickly with a movie in his hands. Don't be afraid, he told me. I know what you're about to see seems unreal, but you're not crazy. And it's the right thing. It's all in the name of our country, he said as he was putting the movie in the DVD player. Quick, let's leave the room. We're not allowed to see the movie, he said as he ran out of the door and I followed him. We then went to the observation room, where we would be looking at Elena as she was watching the movie. Matt was sweaty and anxious. What's the movie about? I asked him. I don't know. I just know we're not supposed to watch it. Just focus on what's going on, and don't be scared, he said. We both sat there and looked at Elena. She was positioned in such a way she had to focus on the movie. But the strange thing is, as soon as the movie started playing, Elena stopped talking and just looked calmly at it. She seemed hypnotized. A couple of minutes into the movie, things turned weird. Elena started to scream like a maniac and cry. Quickly after that, the transformation began. In seconds, this beautiful lady turned into a strange creature. She began to grow and got so skinny you could see all of her bones. Her skin got paler, her hair became thinner, and she grew these things on her back that looked like wings. She looked like a gargoyle, and I couldn't believe it. It all happened so fast, and it was so surreal, I couldn't help but be scared. I started screaming and asking Matt what the fuck was going on and what had happened to her. Matt just kept telling me to stay calm. I don't want to be here. What the fuck is all this? I kept asking. This is when Matt said this was a very secret project to try to turn our enemies into these creatures. Listen, I don't know what's on that video or why it happens, but first, they turn into monsters. Second, we can try to teach them our rules and hopefully use them in war. It's all still a project, but if it becomes successful, we can rule the world. I didn't know what to think. On one hand, I knew it was ethically wrong. On the other hand, I was trying to convince myself that the end justifies the means. Regardless, the only thing I really knew was that the situation was very messed up. Once I finally relaxed, I started with the next step of our mission: observation. Basically, we needed to monitor the demon, analyze how she reacted with time, and whether she was capable of acting docile. Looking at her was not the only uncomfortable thing. Hearing her was terrible too. The sounds she made were nothing like I had seen before. But the worst part was knowing I was guilty of all of this, of turning a human into something so horrible. After 2 days, Matt finally told me more information about the project, things that made me feel even more uncomfortable than I felt before. When I asked Matt how long it would take until the demon became calm, he told me he didn't know, since none of our previous people they converted before ever became docile, and they all had to be put down. I then asked him how many people they have converted. I was hoping to hear a simple number like 2 or 3, but when he told me they had done this to 30 people, I felt repulsed. And I'm not trying to justify myself, but I also felt misled. I was not sure if the information they gave me about Elena was true anymore. Although, even if it was, nobody deserves that fate. The next day, when Matt went to have a nap, and it was my turn to monitor her, he made a big mistake. He left his suitcase in the room with me, a suitcase that Alexander had given him. In his suitcase, I found a folder with documents about Elena. The documents had very detailed information. She was, in fact, a widow, but it was never stated she had done anything that could be considered a threat to our country. She was just a normal 30-year-old woman who worked as a tailor and whose husband used to be a shoemaker. I didn't realize what the time was, and suddenly Matt walked in. When he saw me reading the documents, he asked me what I was doing. I answered back with a question. Was this woman really dangerous? I asked. Yeah, of course. Everybody from that place is dangerous, he answered. Was she trying to form a rebellion? I asked. No, but we knew she was against our government, and you never know what these people are going to do, he said. At that moment, I was raging. I grabbed my gun and told him not to move. He listened to me. Then I told him to walk before me as we went to the room where the demon was. I got close to her, looked at her eyes, and realized every bit of her humanity was gone. All about her now screamed darkness and evil. At first, I wanted to free her, but it all changed, and I knew what I had to do. I shot her 5 times until she finally died. What are you doing? Matt screamed while trying to reach his gun. Luckily, I was able to see what he was doing and immediately shot him in the leg. I didn't want to hurt him, but it was him or me. "Sorry," I said as I quickly ran away. Luckily, we were the only people in that place. I had previously grabbed the car keys that were on his backpack earlier, and then I took the car. I drove to the nearest city where I abandoned the car and immediately called my wife from a public phone. I told her to leave the house immediately with our daughter and to wait for me at her secret place. Luckily, many years ago, we had talked about a place to meet in case we were in danger. After that, I grabbed a taxi and met my wife. She was there with our daughter and only had the essentials. That same afternoon, we took the bus and left the country. 5 years passed, and I was very worried that one day they would find us. Until one day, everything changed. On TV, they mentioned the secret agency and said it had been shut down and that some of the higher-ranking workers in the agency had been sent to jail because of their unethical actions and crimes against humanity. They never mentioned the name of the agency or the details of the crimes, but they did show Alexander's face and mentioned he had killed himself before being captured. That day, my family and I felt a burden that had been taken away from us, and we were grateful. However, going back to our country was not an option. Plus, the tensions there were still present. Our life was better. We had a new house, new names, new jobs, and most importantly, we were far away. I did tell my wife what happened, and although at first she was disappointed, she forgave me. But even now, more than 20 years later, I still can't forgive myself. I knew things could have taken a different turn for Elena if I had known what would happen from the beginning, but sadly, I protected the wrong person. I always thought I was a hero, but it turns out I was worse than the people I worked for. If there is a God, I hope he has mercy for me, and that Elena is truly in a better place.